program is the Active Center.
Okay, let's dive into one of California's most tangled and, frankly, misunderstood issues. It's water. It's a story that's always in the news, but the real reasons behind the headlines are often super confusing and counterintuitive. So we're going to break it down. And it really all starts with a question you've probably asked yourself. You're doing your part, right? You're conserving, you're letting the lawn go brown, so why on earth does your water bill keep going up? It feels like it makes no sense. Well, that paradox is at the very heart of California's water story, and we're about to unpack exactly why it happens.
You hear this all the time. It seems so simple, right? There's water up north, and most of the people are down south, so why not just build a bigger pipe and move it? That's the first big myth we need to tackle, because the reality is so much more complicated than just simple plumbing.
So why can't we just turn on the tap and send more water south? Well, it turns out there are three massive roadblocks standing in the way. These aren't just little problems. They are fundamental constraints on the entire system, and it all starts with the environment itself.
Okay, so picture this. The absolute heart of the state's entire water network is the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. It's this incredibly complex and fragile ecosystem where all the big pumps for the state and federal water projects are located. But if you pump too hard, you start to do real damage to the ecosystem and threaten tiny endangered fish like the Delta Smelt. That's led to some really strict, legally mandated limits on how much water can be pumped out.
The second roadblock, it's physical. I mean, a lot of California's water infrastructure is pretty old. Take the Central Valley. For years, so much groundwater was pumped out that the land itself has literally started to sink. It's a process called subsidence. And as the ground sinks, it actually twists and damages the massive canals that carry water, which means they just can't carry as much as they were designed to.
And finally, you have this legal maze. Oh man, California's water rights system is famously complicated. You have some users, a lot of them in agriculture, who hold what are called senior rights. These were established like over a century ago. And what that means is they have a legal guarantee to their water, even in the driest years. That legally ties the state's hands and limits how much water is even available to be sent somewhere else.
So you've got environmental rules, aging and sinking pipes, and a legal system from the Wild West. It's a mess, right? And that's exactly why, back in 2014, voters were asked to approve this massive water bond, Prop 1. It felt like the solution we all been waiting for. But let's look at the promise versus the very slow reality of that big investment. I mean, look at that number. Over $7.5 billion. That was a huge signal that voters were serious about wanting action. You'd think a check that big would solve a lot of problems, right? So where did all that money actually go?
Well, the funds were spread out across a bunch of important areas. The biggest slice of the pie, a cool $2.7 billion, was earmarked for water storage. But a lot of money also went to other critical things, like water recycling projects, protecting groundwater, and making sure communities have safe drinking water.
But here it is. Here's the catch that explains pretty much all of the delays. That state bond money, it was never meant to pay for a whole new dam or a brand new reservoir. Nope. It's only allowed to cover a project's public benefits, things like flood control or helping the environment. The local water districts, they have to go find the rest of the money, often billions more, all on their own. And the result of that? Well, it's been a long, slow journey. Here we are a decade after that vote, and not a single one of these major new reservoirs has even broken ground. These huge projects get stuck for years and years in permitting, environmental reviews, and, you guessed it, that massive challenge of trying to find all the extra money. The promise of a quick fix has run smack into the reality of building these mega projects. All right, now for the myth that hits all of us closest to home, the one that lands in our mailbox. It's the idea that when we all pitch in and save water, we should all save money. This brings us to what's called the utility paradox, and it explains that really frustrating question we started this whole thing with. You see, a water utilities budget is totally different from most businesses. About 80% of their costs are what we call fixed costs. These are the things that don't change whether they sell a little water or a lot of water. It's the dams, the treatment plants, all the pipes in the ground, and the staff you need to keep it all from falling apart. The cost of the actual water they sell, that's just a tiny piece of the pie. So what happens when we all do the right thing and conserve? The utility sells less water, which means its income goes down. But that huge 80% chunk of fixed costs, that doesn't go anywhere. So to keep the lights on and the water flowing, they have no other choice. They have to raise the price for every gallon of water they do end up selling. Here's a great way to think about it.
Your water utility is kind of like a gym. The gym has to pay the rent, maintain the treadmills, and pay its staff no matter how many people actually show up to work out. When membership drops, or in this case, when water sales drop, the gym has to charge more per visit to cover all those fixed costs. It's the exact same idea.
So, if it's not a simple plumbing issue, and one big check from the voters can't fix it, and our own personal conservation actually leads to higher bills, what on earth is the real problem? Well, the answer lies in a few massive systemic challenges that are really shaping our water future.
It really boils down to three core drivers. First, climate change is making the air and soil thirstier, which means less snowpack and rain actually make it into our rivers and reservoirs. Second, our infrastructure is just old and needs constant, incredibly expensive upgrades. And third, you have to remember that the vast majority of the state's developed water goes to large-scale agriculture.
And the scale of just that infrastructure problem alone it's staggering. Experts figure California is facing a $50 billion funding gap just to get our water and wastewater systems modernized. That kind of money has to come from somewhere, which almost certainly means our water bills are going to keep climbing.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. The simple truth is, the era of cheap, reliable, and predictable water is probably over. So the real challenge ahead isn't just about engineering anymore. It's about economics and ethics. It's about us. How do we, as a society, decide who pays the price for a secure water future? What are we willing to pay?